The city skyline glistened like steel and glass blades cutting into the morning haze. Towering above them all, the headquarters of Vanguard Enterprises gleamed like a monument to power. At the top, behind floor-to-ceiling windows, Victor Harlan, the CEO everyone both envied and feared, adjusted his cufflinks. His three-piece navy suit reflected not just wealth, but the arrogance of a man who believed the world existed only to serve him. Victor had built his empire on charm and ruthlessness. To him, people were numbers, tools, pawns. Secretaries? Replaceable. Interns? Invisible. He prided himself on being untouchable, a king in his castle of glass and steel. That morning, whispers swept through the office. Employees huddled by the elevators, buzzing about the new secretary who was starting today. A woman none of them had met before. Some claimed she was connected to the board. Others said she was just another temp who would crumble under Victor's impossible demands. And then she walked in. Her name was Amara. She wasn't dressed like the secretaries they were used to. No dull grey suits, no timid eyes hiding behind glasses. She wore a sharp, tailored black dress that balanced elegance with authority, and her heels clicked against the marble floor like a judge's gavel striking order into chaos. Her natural hair framed her face proudly, and her gaze was steady, not the nervous shuffle most new hires carried into this office of sharks. People stared, not just because she was striking, but because she carried herself as if she owned the space she entered. When she reached the reception desk, the receptionist stammered, "See, can I help you?" Amara smiled faintly, sliding a folder across the counter. "I'm here for Mr. Harlan." The receptionist's eyes widened as she read the note. Assigned secretary. This was the new hire? She didn't look like someone who'd shuffle papers or fetch coffee. She looked like someone who gave orders, not took them. Still, the receptionist buzzed upstairs. Minutes later, Victor himself stormed out of the elevator, irritation written all over his face. He wasn't accustomed to coming down for new employees, but curiosity had gotten the better of him. When his eyes landed on Amara, he smirked. "You're the new secretary?" "Yes," Amara replied evenly, meeting his gaze without blinking. The smirk grew wider, almost cruel. "You're overdressed. This isn't a runway." A few employees nearby chuckled nervously, glancing at each other for cues. Victor's word was law. If he mocked you, everyone else was free to do the same. But Amara didn't flinch. "Or perhaps," she said calmly, "I'm dressed for where I belong." Victor blinked, momentarily thrown off by her tone. Then he laughed, a sharp bark of sound. "We'll see how long you last." The elevator doors closed behind them as he led her upstairs. Inside his office, Victor wasted no time putting Amara in her place. "You'll answer calls, schedule my meetings, handle documents, and do whatever I tell you without delay," he said, pacing behind his massive oak desk. "Think you can manage that?" "I can manage more than you think," Amara replied, her voice steady. Victor narrowed his eyes. "More than I think." He almost laughed again. But something in her eyes, something calm, unwavering, bothered him. Secretaries usually nodded quickly, eager to please. Amara was neither eager nor intimidated. He decided to test her. "Fine. Go downstairs. Tell accounting to pull every expense report from the last 5 years. Organize them by vendor, then summarize trends for me by noon. If you're still standing after that, maybe you'll keep this job until Friday." He expected her to falter, maybe protest. Instead, Amara picked up a notepad, jotted down his instructions, and turned to leave. Victor frowned. "Wait. Did you even understand what I just asked? That's thousands of documents." "I understood perfectly," she said, pausing at the door. Then, without turning, she added, "You'll have your summary." The door clicked shut. Victor leaned back in his leather chair, chuckling darkly. She'll drown in it. By noon, she'll be in tears. But when noon arrived, Amara returned. Not with stacks of paper, not with excuses. She walked in with a neatly bound report, color-coded graphs, and a USB drive. Victor's eyes widened as he flipped through the document. "How did you?" "Efficient delegation," Amara interrupted softly. "A skill you value, I'm sure." She placed the folder on his desk, then turned to tidy his schedule. For the first time in years, Victor was speechless. By midweek, the office was buzzing. Employees whispered about the new secretary, who somehow always finished Victor's impossible tasks, flawlessly. Some said she had connections in every department. Others swore she must have dirt on Victor himself. But Victor was growing restless. Amara didn't cower. She didn't flatter. She didn't even seem impressed by him. And worst of all, she was competent. Too competent. At lunch one day, He watched from his glass office as employees gathered around her, laughing, leaning in as if she were gravity itself. A janitor even stopped to chat with her, and she listened, really listened, like their words mattered. Victor's jaw tightened. In his world, people were tools. Secretaries were invisible. Yet Amara was becoming the center of attention. That afternoon, he decided to break her. He strode out of his office, voice booming. Amara. The entire floor froze. Yes, Mr. Harlan, she said, standing calmly. Conference room. Now. Inside, he slammed a file onto the table. This contract is worth $50 million. One mistake, and the entire deal collapses. I want you to review every clause, every line, and highlight potential risks. Do you understand the gravity of this? Amara glanced at the contract, then back at him. Perfectly. Victor leaned closer, sneering. Good. Then do it by the end of the day. He stormed out, convinced she'd fail. Hours later, he returned, ready to savor her defeat. But Amara slid the file across the table, annotated, flagged, with a neat summary of legal pitfalls that even the company's lawyers had missed. Victor froze. Where did you? How could you possibly know this? Amara's lips curved into the faintest smile. You'd be surprised what a secretary can know when she listens. And that was when it hit Victor. This woman wasn't just efficient. She was dangerous. Because she wasn't playing the role of a secretary. She was playing something far larger. And Victor had no idea what game he'd just stepped into. If you're still here, I want to know, what would you do if your arrogant boss suddenly met their match? Drop your thoughts below, because the next is where everything begins to unravel. Victor couldn't sleep that night. His penthouse apartment overlooked the city like a throne room. But for the first time, it felt less like a sanctuary and more like a glass cage. He poured himself a drink, staring at his reflection in the window. Amara's calm smile haunted him. She wasn't just smart. She wasn't just competent. She was prepared. And Victor Harlan didn't like mysteries he couldn't solve. By morning, his paranoia had sharpened into suspicion. Run a background check, he ordered his head of security. Everything. Where she's from, where she's worked, who she's connected to. I want her life on paper by tomorrow. But the report baffled him. Amara's record was spotless. Too spotless. No debts. No scandals. Nothing worth gossiping about. It was as if she had been written into existence the moment she walked into his lobby. And that made Victor furious. The following day, he called her into his office. Close the door, he said, his tone low and sharp. Amara did so without hesitation. Victor leaned forward across his desk. Who sent you? Amara arched an eyebrow. Sent me. Don't play coy, Victor snapped. No one is that efficient. You've been here less than a week, and you've solved problems my executives couldn't untangle in months. You knew details about contracts no secretary should know. So tell me, what's your game? For the first time, Amara smiled fully, and it wasn't the polite smile of an employee appeasing her boss. It was sharp, confident, dangerous. My game, she said softly, is survival. Victor blinked. What does that mean? Amara leaned closer, lowering her voice. It means I've seen men like you before. Men who believe power makes them untouchable. Men who forget that sometimes the person standing quietly at their side can see everything. Every weakness, every crack in the armor. And unlike your board, your lawyers, or your executives, I'm not afraid of you. The air between them tightened like a drawn bow. Victor straightened slowly, masking his unease with a laugh. You're bold. I'll give you that. But boldness without loyalty is a liability. Then perhaps, Amara replied, standing tall, you should reconsider who really holds the liability here. She walked out, leaving Victor rattled in a way he hadn't been in years. The days that followed only deepened his unease. Amara didn't just work, she transformed the office. Deadlines that once stretched endlessly suddenly snapped into order under her influence. Departments that bickered for weeks began delivering projects with precision. Even the atmosphere shifted. Employees seemed lighter, more motivated, as if they'd been waiting for someone to cut through the fog of fear Victor had ruled with. And Victor hated it. Not because the results were bad, they were excellent. But because those results weren't his. They were hers. One afternoon, during a board meeting, Victor watched as Amara stood in the corner, silently organizing notes. The directors glanced at her often, some even nodding subtly in her direction, as if she were the one keeping the meeting anchored. Victor slammed his hand on the table. Focus. Eyes on me. The room fell silent. But Victor noticed the way Amara's lips curved ever so slightly. It wasn't arrogance. It was patience. As if she knew something he didn't. By the end of the month, Victor reached his breaking point. "You're undermining me," he accused one evening, cornering her in his office. "I'm doing my job," Amara replied coolly. "No," Victor spat, pacing like a predator. "You're doing more than your job. You're making people look at you instead of me. You're making me look dispensable." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Amara stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. "Maybe that's what terrifies you most," she whispered. "That for the first time, someone isn't afraid to show you how replaceable you really are." Victor froze. Because deep down, beneath the layers of ego and arrogance, he knew she was right. That night, as the office emptied and the city lights flickered on, Amara stayed late at her desk. Victor watched her from his glass office, shadows pooling around him. Who was she really? Why was she here? And what did she want from him? For the first time in his career, Victor Harlan, the man who had bent entire industries to his will, felt like a piece on someone else's board. And he didn't like the game. Not one bit. If you've made it this far, tell me this. Do you think Amara is here to destroy Victor, or to save him? Comment your guess below, and don't forget to subscribe, because the truth behind Amara's plan begins to surface, and trust me, it will change everything. The following week, Victor thought he had regained control. He doubled down on meetings, barked harsher orders, and reminded everyone who signed their paychecks. But no matter how loudly he roared, the room's center of gravity shifted, always back to her. Amara. It was like watching water slip through his fingers. No matter how tightly he clenched, she seeped through, reshaping everything he touched. And that terrified him. But what Victor didn't know was that Amara hadn't just come to take notes and fetch coffee. She had a secret agenda, one that would make even the mighty Victor Harlan question everything he thought he knew about power. It started with a gala. The company's annual fundraising event was a parade of silk gowns and black tuxedos, champagne flowing like rivers. Victor thrived at galas. He was the lion in his natural habitat, soaking up attention. But that night, something was different. Amara wasn't just in the background, clipboard in hand. She was present, dressed in a sleek black gown. She carried herself with the kind of elegance that made people stop mid-conversation. Investors drifted toward her. Directors lingered in her orbit. Even Victor's closest allies seemed more curious about her opinion than his. "Who is she?" one whispered. Victor forced a smile. "My secretary." But the word sounded wrong. Too small. Too dismissive. Because everyone could see, Amara wasn't a secretary that night. She was a force. And then, just when Victor thought things couldn't get worse, Amara was approached by someone from his past. Someone who shouldn't have known her name at all. A tall man in a silver tie crossed the ballroom. "Amara?" he said warmly, extending a hand. "It's been years." Victor's blood ran cold. "Years?" Amara shook the man's hand effortlessly, her smile calm. "It has, hasn't it?" Victor excused himself from his circle and pulled her aside. "Explain." "Now." But Amara only tilted her head. "Relax, Victor. Not everything revolves around you." Victor clenched his jaw. "Who was that?" Amara leaned in close enough that her perfume curled around him like smoke. "Someone who remembers me very differently than you do. And maybe someday, you'll find out why." She walked away, leaving Victor standing frozen in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by laughter that suddenly sounded like mockery. Who was this woman who appeared out of nowhere, yet seemed to know everyone? Victor couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't climbing the ladder. She was building one beneath his feet. The next morning, Victor did what he always did when threatened. He played offense. He called Amara into his office. "You're done here," he said coldly. "Pack your things." But Amara didn't flinch. She folded her arms and stared him down. "You think firing me solves your problem?" she asked. Victor slammed his desk. "You're my problem." "No," Amara said softly. "I'm your lesson." Silence. Victor laughed bitterly. "Lesson? From you?" Amara leaned forward, her eyes locking with his. "Victor, you've built an empire on intimidation. But power built on fear is like glass. It looks strong, until the first crack shatters it. And guess what?" She tapped the edge of his desk gently. "I already see the cracks." That sentence, those words, would haunt Victor for weeks. Because Amara wasn't bluffing. She already had the leverage to bring him to his knees. The following days were a whirlwind. Contracts Victor hadn't signed off on began moving forward. Meetings were scheduled without his approval. And yet, everything worked. Profits rose. Investors smiled. Employees whispered with hope instead of fear. And every time Victor tried to reassert control, It was as though Amara had already anticipated his move 3 steps ahead. It was like playing chess against someone who had memorized the entire game. One night, frustrated beyond reason, Victor stormed into the office where Amara was working late. "Why are you here, really?" he demanded. "Who are you?" Amara closed her laptop slowly and met his eyes. "I'm the person you underestimated," she said simply. Victor sneered. "That's not an answer." "No," Amara replied. "But it's the only one you're ready for." She walked past him, leaving Victor alone with the truth he hated most. He wasn't in control anymore. But what Victor didn't realize yet, what no one in that building realized, was that Amara's true identity wasn't just about her past. It was about a future that would shake Victor's empire to its core. If you're still watching, let me ask you this. Do you think Amara is here to tear down Victor's empire, or to take it for herself? Comment below and share your guess. And don't forget to subscribe, because her true identity begins to unravel, and the twist will leave you speechless. Victor was unraveling. His board didn't say it out loud, but he saw it in their eyes, the subtle shift when Amara spoke. She didn't just take notes anymore. She led. She didn't just support meetings. She steered them. And Victor hated it. He poured whiskey into his glass late that night, his penthouse silent except for the hum of the city. He stared out over the skyline he once ruled and whispered to himself, "She's just a secretary. That's all." But the words didn't even convince himself. Because the truth was, Victor wasn't battling an intern or an assistant. He was battling someone who knew his empire's weak points better than he did. And soon, she was about to prove it. The next morning, Victor arrived at the office to find his staff gathered around Amara's desk. They weren't laughing nervously like they usually did with each other. They were listening to her. Amara was explaining a new efficiency plan, one that Victor had been too busy to consider for years. "Cutting costs by firing employees makes you look strong short-term," she said. "But investing in people makes you last. And lasting is the only true power." The crowd murmured in agreement. Victor's fists clenched. His company, his employees, his empire. Listening to her like she was the rightful leader. He stormed in. "Back to work. Now!" The room scattered like startled birds, but not before Victor caught the look Amara gave him. Calm. Almost pitying. And that was when Victor realized something terrifying. He was no longer feared. The very currency of his power had devalued overnight. That evening, Victor called his lawyer. "I want her background checked. Everything. Family, school, employment history. Find me dirt." 2 days later, the lawyer returned, pale-faced. "Victor, there is no record." Victor froze. "What do you mean, no record?" "I mean, it's like she doesn't exist. No past. No trace." Victor slammed his fist on the desk. "Everyone has a past." The lawyer hesitated. "Maybe hers isn't one you want to uncover." And that single line planted a seed of paranoia, so deep that Victor couldn't sleep. Because what kind of woman walks into a billionaire's company without a past, and takes it over like she was born to rule it? The paranoia ate at him. He began snapping at employees, showing up disheveled, even skipping meetings. He stalked Amara through the glass walls of the office like a predator circling prey. But deep down he knew. He wasn't the predator anymore. She was. One night, unable to contain himself, he barged into Amara's office. "I know you're hiding something," he hissed. "And I'll find it. Whatever game you're playing, it ends now." Amara leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "You still don't get it, do you, Victor?" she said quietly. Victor narrowed his eyes. "Get what?" Amara stood, her presence filling the room like thunder. "I'm not hiding. You are. You've been hiding behind fear, behind money, behind this empire you built on broken backs. And now, it's time someone exposed you." Victor's heart pounded. "Exposed me to who?" Amara smiled faintly. "To everyone who matters." That sentence would echo in Victor's mind like a death toll. Because the very next morning, Amara's identity, the one she had kept hidden, began to slip into the light. If you're still here, you're already hooked. And trust me, the biggest twist is yet to come. Do you think Amara is seeking justice or revenge? Comment your guess below, and make sure you're subscribed, because the truth about who she really is will leave you breathless. The morning sun sliced through the glass walls of Victor's office, but he felt none of its warmth. He hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands shook from too much whiskey, too much fear. He expected Amara to walk in meekly, carrying notes or coffee. Instead, she walked in with a folder, thick, heavy, purposeful. She placed it on his desk without a word. Victor frowned. "What is this?" Amara met his gaze, steady and calm. The truth. The one you've been running from. Victor flipped open the folder. At first, his brain refused to process what he was seeing. Documents. Contracts. Photos. Records of every shady deal. Every under-the-table payoff. Every employee he had ruined. And then, there was a picture. A photograph of himself, 20 years younger, standing outside a rundown house in the poorer part of the city. Beside him was a woman, exhausted, holding a child with bright eyes. Victor's stomach dropped. "No," he whispered. Amara's voice was soft, but it cut like a blade. "That little girl was me. Imagine thinking you are untouchable, only to realize the person dismantling your empire is someone whose life you shattered decades ago." Victor's mind raced. He remembered. The woman, a secretary who worked for his company, fired without warning when she got pregnant. He never thought about her again. Until now. "You're lying," Victor spat, though his voice trembled. Amara shook her head slowly. "You built your fortune on people like my mother. She gave her life to raise me, while you crushed hers. Do you know what it's like to grow up with nothing, because of a man who had everything?" Victor's throat tightened. He wanted to roar, to deny, to crush her with words. But for the first time in his life, he felt small. Amara leaned closer. "I didn't come here for revenge, Victor. I came here for justice. And now, every truth you buried is about to come into the light." That day, whispers spread through the company like wildfire. Leaks of Victor's past scandals appeared online. Journalists circled the building, and shareholders demanded answers. But the loudest voice wasn't from outside. It was from inside. It was Amara. She spoke at a staff meeting that Victor himself couldn't face. "This company doesn't belong to fear anymore," she declared. "It belongs to integrity, to people who believe in more than profit. It belongs to all of us." The room erupted in applause. Some employees cried. Victor, watching from behind tinted glass, felt the last thread of his control snapping. And still, the nightmare wasn't over. Because Amara wasn't just taking his company. She was about to take something even bigger. That night, Victor sat alone in his mansion. The folder Amara had given him lay open on the table. His hands shook as he looked at the final page. It wasn't about business. It wasn't about money. It was a letter. His own handwriting. A dismissal note he had written decades ago, firing Amara's mother without cause. For words glared back at him like poison. Replaceable. Disposable. Not needed. Victor buried his face in his hands. For the first time, the titan of industry wept. And in the silence, he realized, Amara hadn't just exposed his sins. She had forced him to confront the one truth he had always feared. His empire wasn't collapsing because of her. It was collapsing because of him. If this twist hit you hard, imagine what's coming next. Because Amara will make a decision that doesn't just end Victor's career. It could end his life as he knows it. Do you think she'll destroy him completely, or give him one final chance? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget, subscribe so you don't miss the explosive finale. The boardroom was silent. Victor sat at the long table, his once commanding presence reduced to a shell of a man. His tailored suit hung loosely on his frame. His eyes were hollow, and his hands trembled as they clutched the edge of the table. Across from him sat Amara. Confident. Composed. Unshakable. The entire board of directors watched in stunned silence as she laid out the last piece of evidence. A hidden account, offshore, containing millions siphoned from employees' pensions. "Gentlemen," Amara said firmly, her voice filling the room. "This is the man you've been following. A thief, a liar, and a coward." Victor's jaw clenched. "Enough," he growled, though his voice was weak. "I built this empire. None of you would be here without me." Amara leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "And none of us will survive if you remain in power. Your empire wasn't built on vision. It was built on broken backs." The directors whispered among themselves. One by one, they turned toward Amara, nodding. The vote was swift, brutal, final. Victor had been removed. Imagine watching the world you built crumble in front of your eyes, knowing the person who replaced you was the child you once dismissed as nothing. Victor staggered out of the boardroom, his heart pounding. He felt like the walls were closing in on him. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but their voices blurred into static. At the steps of the building, Amara followed. "Victor," she called out. He stopped, shoulders slumped. Slowly, he turned. "This doesn't have to be your ending," she said softly. "But it is your choice. You can spend the rest of your life fighting ghosts, or you can finally face what you've done." Victor stared at her, broken. "Why didn't you just destroy me completely?" Amara's voice wavered, but her eyes stayed strong. Because revenge creates nothing. Justice creates change. What you did shaped me, but it won't define me. For the first time, Victor felt the weight of his own words. Replaceable, disposable, not needed. And he realized that it wasn't Amara who had replaced him. It was the truth. Months later, Victor vanished from the public eye. Some said he went abroad. Others whispered he had lost everything. But Amara? She rebuilt the company into something greater. Fair wages. Opportunities. Respect. A legacy not of greed, but of integrity. At her first annual meeting as CEO, she told the crowd, "This isn't about me. It's about all of us. No one here is disposable. No one is replaceable. Everyone matters." The crowd erupted in cheers. And in the shadows of the hall, far from the spotlight, Victor watched silently. His empire was gone, but in his hollow chest, for the first time, he felt something new. Regret. And maybe, just maybe, redemption. And that's where our story ends. But think about this. What would you do if someone from your past came back to expose your darkest secrets? Would you fight them, or accept the truth? Let me know in the comments below. If you were hooked till the end, don't just leave. Hit that subscribe button, because the next story might just shake you even harder. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.